All right, so stories. So more and more I'm coming to a deeper understanding of the ways that myths create reality. That the stories that we tell ourselves are the filters through which we interpret all of our experiences and everything that happens to us. And that stories themselves are the way that we unpack emotions. That emotions are so multifaceted, so complex, and so ineffable that we end up telling ourselves stories to be able to describe emotional states. So if we're telling ourselves a story like, people always abandon me, not only are we attracting to ourselves situations where we'll feel abandoned, but that we'll interpret different things regardless of the person's intention as them abandoning us. And this is where we can get stuck, because the external world will confirm our stories if those are the stories that we're interpreting our experience with. So stories can respell us, affirming our previous reality, or they can dispel us, freeing us from that reality. And what makes that difference between feeling a story we have and re-experiencing it over and over again versus having the process of identifying and telling a story be a shamanic initiation. And I use the word shamanic because shamanically we understand that whatever our wounding is contains our medicine. That our souls are creating certain stories because there's a deep healing there that wants to happen for us. And part of it to me feels like when we tell a story that respells us, we see ourselves as a character in the story. We see ourselves as the person who's being abandoned. And when we shamanically tell a story, there's this understanding that we're every character in the tale. That not only are we the person being abandoned, but we're the person abandoning. And that's what happens so much when these stories is at work, is in self-protection or self-preservation. We abandon all these people in our lives, and most importantly, we abandon ourselves in our fear. So when we tell a story and we acknowledge that we're every character in that story, there's an opportunity for us to become lucid, to bring the process of unconsciously interpreting external reality according to our story into consciously realizing what we're doing. And then we have the opportunity to make a different choice. As I've journeyed into soul retrieval and past lives, sometimes I get really fixated on a story. I get super attached to the understanding that it gives me. Oh my God, that time I lost my baby walking through the desert. Oh, that lifetime I was a slave. There's a seduction to understanding that I feel for myself I get stuck there. I begin over-identifying with the story and just with the character who is a victim in it. When I was getting really into soul retrieval, my friend who actually got me into soul retrieval was moving into being into Ho'oponopono, which is a Hawaiian form of healing based on 4 simple phrases. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Sometimes we get so stuck in our stories that we don't feel like we have any need to apologize. But the way that I like to think of I'm sorry is that you're actually asking for the attention of the divine to shine down on whatever situation it is. You know, even if you're recalling something where you were abused, just saying, I'm sorry. Not only I'm sorry for whatever part I played in this, but I'm sorry. Like, please, divinity, shine your light on this feeling. Shine your light on this memory. And then you bring forgiveness for everyone involved, and love and gratitude. And in that holy trinity of love, forgiveness, and gratitude, healing can happen. The difference between soul retrieval and Ho'oponopono is that soul retrieval is much more storied. You actually go into whatever that story is where you were abused. Whereas Ho'oponopono, you can kind of just throw at everything or just go into a meditative state with it. And I think there's a phase of development we go through where the story is important, where you can't just send out love, forgiveness, and gratitude without desiring that knowing ourselves better that comes with the story. At a certain point, when you've excavated a lot of these stories, they might become less important. Maybe you exhaust that interest to be wading through waist deep in the Maya. I mean, this brings up a really important question, which is, what is healing? And I think healing is reclaiming those parts of ourselves that are stuck in trauma so that we can be more whole, so that we're not slaves to our stories, so that we're free. And part of what's been so healing for me is that piece of knowing myself better. That piece of knowing myself better that allows me to recognize when I may be unconsciously playing out dynamics, when I may be unconsciously running certain stories. One of the most profound tools for connecting to healing in this way, for me, has been the ability to connect to my personal myth. Because when I connect to my personal myth, it gives purpose and direction to all of these traumas, to all of the stories that I'm attracted to. And especially at this point when so many reality frames are being held up, and for me that can get so caught up in other people's stories and what they might think and how I might play to them and blah. Sometimes I need to take some time to figure out where am I at in relation to my personal myth, what stories are actually going on. And when I take that time to figure it out, it's always worth it. It's always for the benefit of me and everyone else involved. It allows my own sense of self to be the context for which all these other things are happening. And that this is actually what manipulation is. Manipulation is when we get pulled in to other people's stories, when we allow the way that they're interpreting external reality to be the way that we're interpreting external reality. Like I even think about guilt, which is so viciously powerful. And when someone else says, you're hurting me, it's so easy for me to be like, oh my God, I'm hurting you. As opposed to understanding that that's just their motherfucking story. And that the manipulative aspect of guilt is me being pulled in to their reality frame. So what can we do to connect to our own personal myth in the moment, other than taking like a whole lot of time alone, which isn't always available? In process work, they say that your first childhood dream, and if you can't remember your first childhood dream, or if you only remember remembering because someone told you, just see if you can find it. See if you can find that first childhood dream that's really yours. And I try even just surprising myself with it, just being like, what's my first childhood dream? And maybe it'll just come to you. And if you can't do that, or if it's too fuzzy, then your first childhood memory. But really, they think that this first moment, whether it's a dream or whether it's your childhood memory, the first thing was the blueprint that templated your consciousness in a certain way. And that's actually the seed that then fractals out into your entire life. That first childhood dream, that first childhood memory contains all of the threads of all of the themes that you're going to be working on for your entire life. And so sometimes just connecting back to that childhood dream or that childhood memory can give you clues about what your personal myth is. Another thing they say is that in every relationship, in every fear, there's a high dream and a low dream. You can kind of feel into it. Like if you're really going to let all of your greatest fears realize, then right there is your low dream. And for a relationship or just for your life, there it is. And just like there's a low dream, there's also a high dream. All of your greatest hopes, all of the ways that you escape into fantasy are right there too. And you might be in relationships with people where you're living something closer to your low dream, but you're so connected to that high dream that you're staying in it. And if you can bring the awareness of your high dream and your low dream into facing the reality of what's actually going on in the moment, then that can be a great compass point for you for understanding your hopes, your fears, and what's actually going on and what you actually want. And in a very real way, all myths are origin stories. All myths are mother, father, child. It can also be the origin of the moment, the friendship, the culture, the country where we came from. The great kahuna Harry Jim says that you are half your mother and half your father. It's those mother-father tendrils that are just waiting for you to embrace them, to bold-face look them in the eye and say, yes, I see you in me, so that you can actually move on and find your true essence. To actually be able to say, look, yes, that is my mother and I am her. Look, yes, that is my father and I am that, is freedom. These stories, and especially the state of our own personal myths, can also be a vibration. It can be a home tone. I was working with this sound healer, and he said that everyone has a certain vibration that they're vibrating at. He had us meditate and say, just in your mind, silently, go up and down in scales until you find that note that feels like your home tone. And then he went out and he called it inside all of us. He's like, oh, you're an A sharp. You're a B flat. I can spot a B flat a mile away. And he's like, now think about who you're attracted to. And often the people who we're attracted to, it's their home tones are making harmonic resonances with ours. Or sometimes they're a harmonic fifth to us. And you can actually see that people who are great speakers are coming from their home tone all the time. Like Deepak Chopra is always speaking in his home tone. The Dalai Lama is always right there, connected to himself. And so that we can find a body and a home in our origin stories. We can find a body and a home in our personal myths. It can be like that, a vibration. Storytelling is so helpful because stories actually weave together the left and right parts of our brain. They demand linearity at the same time that they demand absolute presence. And so I've started asking myself real simple things. I'm feeling something and I don't know what it is. And I say, once upon a time, there was a questioner that went to ask a diviner a burning question. And then it pushes me to ask a question. It also pushes me to be the diviner and to answer that question. And it always unfolds in really unexpected ways, whatever happens after. There's this notion in indigenous cultures of feeding the story, that once we hear a story, we feed the story by sharing what part of it touched us, what part of it sparked us. And so we can feed our own stories. And this is, once again, by noticing what we're attracted to and what we're hooked by. It can also be pouring that self-love back onto ourselves, especially if our stories are so much about overcoming trauma, so much about healing those unhealed places. Feed your own story with self-love. Myth is alive. All of our stories are operating right here, which we can either respell ourselves to say, and that's the way it's going to always be, or we can come shamanically, powerfully, right to the present moment and say, everything is here. Everything is here for me to love and meet and maybe even fight, but most certainly be present for. You don't need to go down all the soul retrieval rabbit holes unless you want to, because everything is present in this life and everything is present and alive in this moment. You are a soul on an epic journey, and so when life sucks, and when you're disconnected, and when shit's hard, just remember, it's all about the motherfucking soul journey. Be a wolf. Be a lion. Take no shit. Set goals and smash them. Eat people's faces off. Be a better person. Show people who the fuck you are. Never apologize for being awesome. And stay the motherfucking course.